Hi, Abhishek, Adarsh, can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I was just thinking, maybe we can just go ahead and get started anyway. Possibly if others are joining later, it's fine. Anyway, I think there's no specific agenda right now. So maybe it's okay to just get started, right? And
Sure.
at least those who have joined, we can get go ahead and interact with them, right?
Sure. Okay. Well, yeah. Okay. So I think we can start. Yeah. Looks like this is the strength that we will be dealing with at least today. Well, definitely not, but we had expected for this session at least. Well, anyways, let's get started. So we have been joined by Professor Nitin today, a faculty of this course, and we are happy to take up all of your queries. Well, so let me just mention it in the beginning itself. So this is a session that will be completely owned by you all, and we will be waiting to answer the queries, to answer the questions that you may have. So I would request everyone in this session to please ask whatever questions you may have, and we are happy to answer it.
So just one minor thing I wanted to add before we proceed. See, I know that today is Friday. I don't know whether that had an impact on the number of people who could join. Unfortunately for me, I have some other commitments that are there tomorrow morning. So as it stands, it is very unlikely I'll be able to join the live session tomorrow. But if I can, I'll try to drop in at some point. But more importantly, I think, it should also be clear to everyone that if necessary, I generally do sort of look in on the discourse forums. I've been responding to queries over there. I would strongly encourage that anybody who's not been able to participate in this live, initiate a discussion there, and, we can always carry it forward on that. One very quick thing, before we get to the questions was I wanted to say a couple of words about sort of the philosophy of this course, so to say, right? And a little bit of not exactly an explanation, but at least some kind of a motivation for why we did things the way that we have done them, right? So if you go back and look at the course contents, right, essentially what we did was started off with HTML, CSS, right? I mean, the basics of how do you create a web page, right? And the idea was, okay, at the very least, I need to be able to get started, put up something which looks like a web page before I can create a web application. But after that came the structure of an application, right? And once again, over there, we need to have some kind of a model that allows us to think and reason about the way that we go about designing an app, right? And one of the most powerful models over the years has been this model view controller, right? Okay, so there's two ways in which I'm using the word model, right? One is an overall model of computation, right, which is the model view controller. And within that, there is the model which basically refers to one specific data model corresponding to one type of data that you are using. Now, as I've mentioned in a couple of occasions before, first of all, people might have had objections. Okay, why are you just doing vanilla HTML, CSS? Similarly, the next thing is why model view controller, right? I mean, because there are like you go online and look on the websites, and there are any number of things which say, okay, yeah, this is outdated, that this is not really relevant, this is not the correct way to look at a web application. But the point is, a web application can be seen as a subset of general GUI applications, but of course it has its own constraints, which is why all those other variants, which are not exactly model view controller, have come into the picture. And the way that we look at courses, generally speaking, at least in the context of courses that can be taught at IIT, is that rather than teaching one specific technology and saying, okay, this is how you can build an app, we would like to focus more on what are the thought processes that you need to engage in, right, when you are trying to develop an app. Okay, and I think that is an important part of essentially the way that you would look at this whole process of constructing an app, right? You need to be able to think in terms of how do I reason, how do I go about designing the app, and as a result, how would you construct the final system that you want to do. Okay, which is why, of course, we also try to have programming assignments along the way. We, as you know, we have run into a number of sort of operational difficulties, teething problems, hopefully, right? But I'm hoping that despite that, all of you have had at least a good experience in terms of the overall learning process, right? And the reason I'm saying all this is to sort of, in some sense, anticipate any questions you might have with regard to things like, why did you choose Flask? Why Python, right? Is this really the right way to develop an app in this day and age? What about all the other new technologies that are there? And my answer to all of those is simply going to be, sure, they are all there, but all that we are looking at is the foundation, right? How do you understand the basic concepts? After that, whenever you go and look at a new technology, you should be able to appreciate in what way it is different from what it is that we have looked at over here. Okay. So as you know, this course basically covered all of those basic concepts, brought in the idea of APIs, and then some things like, how do you set up backends, front ends, validation, a bunch of different topics that all need to be addressed in the context of an app. Okay. And that's basically where we are. So this final project that has been given was in some sense trying to see how do you bring all those together, right? How do you put together the concepts that we have covered in the initial parts and actually put it together as a cohesive one app at the end of the day. Okay. So that's basically from my side. All I wanted to do was give a little summary of the course in some sense, and also a little bit of the reasoning why it was planned in this particular way. Now, as Abhishek said, right, I think we'll leave it open. You can pretty much ask me anything, right? As far as possible related to the course, but even if it is something else, you want to have, I mean, depending on time, if we have questions that are not directly related to the course, happy to take those as well. So open to the audience. Anyone can go ahead.
Hello, sir. Sir, where do you have to submit the video and all?
I think those links will be given to you. I mean, that should be posted shortly. And the idea is that I'm not sure if that has already been circulated, but you basically put together a report that contains a brief description of how you have gone about doing the design. And in that, you put a link to the video that you have recorded. And the video itself should be something that is, hosted on Google Drive. You can do it in your online degree, Google Drive, right? And put a link to that.
Okay, sir. And sir, while doing the login, do you have to implement Flask login or just a simple check and login?
It's up to you, right? So again, like I have said in some other places, part of the reason for bringing in the login is just to sort of demonstrate what a login based system would look like. I mean, it's not been very clearly defined that, you need to have administrative and different users and so on. So I'm sort of leaving that open to you. But as long as you are able to implement what is described over there, that's fine. You don't need to use Flask login. You can use other approaches. You could even just use something where, a person types in their username and that's it. The system accepts that as the username, right? It doesn't even ask for a password, right? Okay. So I'm not looking for how secure is your login system or whether you have sort of implemented, a foolproof mechanism that can't be sort of spoofed or anything of that sort. Those are not concerns in this project, at least. So yeah, you can just do anything simple, but you should be able to explain how the login process works and how you are sort of protecting or using that information within the context of the app.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, I think please go ahead. I mean, Cherian, I think you raised your hand, so go ahead.
Yes, sir. I had a few questions about validation.
Sure.
So, which are the points at which we should validate this? At the client side using JavaScript and.
Are you talking about in the context of the flashcard project or in general?
Both.
Okay.
So in general, how would we do it? And are we required to do the same thing for this flashcard project?
So as far as the flashcard project is concerned, like I've said, that's more sort of on the optional side. So if you can show that you have done some validation, then that sort of counts as a bonus mark rather than being a compulsory mandatory requirement, right? But so let me put it this way. I think I touched upon this in the lectures as well, but the way that you have to look at security, right, ultimately is that the client could be anybody. So in other words, at the end of the day, there is a server that is actually running the application logic and giving out web pages, right, HTML pages that are seen by various clients. And the important thing is first and foremost to make sure that that server is kept safe. Okay, so to a large extent, the entire viewpoint of security is from the point of view of the server. It has to be set up in such a way that if at all there is an attack or something of that sort, you are protecting the server first and foremost. Okay, which means that from the point of view of validations, you have to ensure that the server takes maximum steps to protect itself. And no matter what the client is feeding into it, the server will always do a validation. Okay. Now, client-side validation is done for a different reason. Client-side validation is done basically to sort of reduce the network traffic and also maybe to make the user experience a little bit more smooth, right? So, for example, if I know that I'm asking a person to enter an email and I put a small input box over there, I can do the validation at that end. And if the user types in something which does not look like an email address, I can reject it straight away, right? I mean, that would be like the browser itself can sort of reject and say, look, this doesn't look like an email address. Please type in something that's a legitimate email address. Okay. Now, the point is, the access to the server is not always through the browser. I can just make a HTTP request directly using curl or wget or something like that, which means that the server cannot assume that things were properly validated at the front end. So if you're doing validation, that's the way to look at it, right? I mean, it is absolutely mandatory that you do the validation at the server side, that is at the back end, and doing it at the front end is optional. There are like no guarantees associated with that. If you do validation at the front end, good, your user interface might be better. But even if you don't do it, your application should remain safe. Does that answer your question?
Yes. As a follow-up, I have 2 or 3 more related to validation when it comes to appending to the database.
Okay.
So I experienced this while doing this project. So if I have a database and some of the attributes have a domain with db.string 30, where 30 is, I think, the number of characters.
Okay.
So it still allows me to put in 100 characters into that. The database doesn't throw any error. That is one.
But does it store only 30 characters or does it store more than 30 characters?
It stores more than 30 characters. So in my class definition for SQL, this thing, Alchemy, I put db.string 30.
Okay.
But from the application, I'm able to put in 100 characters or 200 characters. Similarly, even if I define it as db.integer, I'm able to put characters into the db for that particular attribute. Another observation is even if there are foreign key constraints and if I do something like cascade delete all, that SQLite or SQL Alchemy doesn't seem to handle that. So I have to go to each relation and delete these things.
Okay, so with regard to the first part, which is that you have declared it as a db.string of 30, but it's allowing you to put a longer string. If you actually go into SQLite and open the DB and sort of ask for the schemas, does it say that it's a varchar 30 or does it say just varchar, undefined or something like that?
It says varchar 30.
Okay. Now,
so I opened it in a SQL viewer also.
Right. So, I mean,
SQLite.
I must admit that I'm not very, and I'm not sufficiently familiar with SQLite to have, to be able to answer that properly. I believe this is something specific to SQLite. I think, probably other databases would have different constraints. I mean, I don't think they will allow you, or at least, they might accept something which is longer, but they will store only the first 30 characters, as far as I know. Right. But that's an interesting point you make, which basically is sort of the implication of this is that when you are doing validation, you have to actually do it explicitly before you do the store. Right. And the point that you raised, right, saying that, okay, I've declared it as string of 30, but it is allowing me to store like 100 bytes. That is potentially a security problem. Right. And the reason I'm saying it's a security problem is because in the worst case, it can even lead to something called buffer overflows, right? You put in a lot of text and that basically causes the system to crash somehow, meaning that some entry somewhere has overflowed across whatever it was allowed to be. And, buffer overflows used to happen a lot in the past because C programs, right? At least, many of these the basic applications were written in C, and C is not very good with handling strings, meaning that in particular, it has this idea that a string is determined by searching for the null character at the end of the string, right? Rather than just having a length associated with it. So very often, if you sort of type in a long string and it overwrites the null character, it can actually end up overflowing completely and making parts of the system accessible to others that should not have been. So in this context, it's a good point that you raised. I actually need to check on it. I think Tej would be better placed to answer this part of it because I think he's more familiar with SQLite. But the implication of this is that you actually need to do the checks in your application logic before you actually try writing into the actually assigning something into the database, right? But you are right. I mean, I would normally expect that SQL Alchemy should by itself have some way of taking care of this. That's something I need to check. Yeah.
Okay, sir. Just one more question regarding this validation.
Okay.
Yeah. So suppose I was accepting only English characters or Latin alphabet characters, A, B, C, D, and capital, small case, and space.
Okay.
That kind of thing. I could do a validation where I reject anything that is not alphabets and space.
Okay.
But since we are accepting other Unicode characters like Hindi, Devanagari script or other scripts, how would I go about that in a reject fashion? Like
So
I will accept only valid things. I will reject everything that is not valid.
Correct. So, I mean, there's no trivial way of validating. I believe there are, you can probably write functions that will check if your input is within a certain Unicode range, right? And you would have to define multiple Unicode ranges and say that, as long as your input is within this kind of a range and parses as this kind of a Unicode character, it will be accepted. Okay. But in general, so for example, I mean, I think there is this thing, just checking whether something is alphanumeric, for example, is a very straightforward thing to do, right? Even regular expressions have support for that. I'm not sure what is the status of support for other languages in that context, right? But the bottom line is this. I mean, if I wanted to do something of that sort, it would basically be that, I mean, if you think about even how the Latin alphabet is being accepted, at the end of the day, there is some function which is looking at what the bytes that have been input and checking whether each byte falls within the range that is acceptable, okay, which is defined as part of the Latin alphabet, right? So there is some function which does this and returns, true or false, saying valid or not valid, right? And whatever validation you do would ultimately be that you need to create a similar function which can read arbitrary Unicode strings and then pretty much say, okay, the Unicode characters over here fall within the ranges that are acceptable for my application. Right. So you could, for example, write a function which will even go to the extent of saying that it will accept Devanagari script, but not Chinese, for example. Right. So that's possible. But is there a generic solution? Not that I know of. Okay, that would depend on, you probably need to pick up some library either in Python or and yeah, it would have to be in Python because you need to do the validation at the backend. Or some similar way by which it can actually check values. Right.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, and by the way, I just noticed there was a message in the chat from Pritodeep who had mentioned that he tried inputting text into an integer-only field and SQL Alchemy threw an exception. Actually, that's what I would have accepted. I would have expected. So, Cherian, since you mentioned that you were able to put a string into an integer field, that at least was a bit strange. I mean, putting longer strings into a size-limited string, that is possible, but putting a string into an integer field seems like very problematic. That should not have happened. Normally. Maybe you can just double check under what circumstances this happened, or maybe share a piece of the code with us so that we can take a look. But the point is, this is more of an implementation issue. I can't sort of speak for SQL Alchemy and say that this is the right way to do it as such. If it doesn't do the validation, then you need to be extra careful in the app and make sure you do what validation you need.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Yes, please go ahead, Peter.
Yeah, good evening, Professor. Am I audible?
Good evening. Yes, you are.
Okay, I just had a couple of questions regarding this project. Firstly, the presentation that was shared with us, the flashcard app presentation. The problem statement, there are a few slides which say code requirements, and then there is one that says recommended, and the recommended one contains APIs and validation. I just wanted to clarify whether is it mandatory to implement that as well. It says recommended, and in bracket it says graded as well. So
what we are doing basically is that this will sort of be like a bonus mark.
Okay.
Which, assuming that you have scored 100% everywhere else in the rest of the course, then this will not make any difference to you. But on the other hand, if you have sort of lost some marks somewhere else, then this could be used to make up for it.
Okay. So so if I am unable to implement the API, so I won't be penalized in any way. That is just what I wanted to clarify.
Abhishek, I think you had. Did you have anything to mention at that point, or?
Yeah, definitely. So API just corresponds to the bonus marks. So if you have not even implemented that API, you should be able to. You should be evaluated on your project.
Okay. Sure, sir. And one more doubt is the models.py, when we are actually creating the database, the SQLite database, I did not, the data that was entered initially, I did not do it via the DB create thing. I created the model, then I used a DB viewer to manually input the data. So while reviewing, will they accept my pre-made, I mean the values that are already there, or they will have, I will have to code everything in?
No, I think this should be fine, that we can accept pre-made SQLite database. Abhishek, do you see any problems with that approach?
No, I don't think. As far as you can show the correct functionality in your app while demonstration, this should be okay.
Yeah. So, we have also asked you to submit the code. So in that code, make sure that you submit your populated SQLite file, right? So that we have that. What I would suggest is, you also sort of can just make sure that there's a copy of that file, as a backup for the thing, in case there is something which, when you run the app, it tries to create a new file or something of that sort. But yeah, this is fine. Primarily you will be demonstrating it, but we also need your code so that we can also do the verification at the end and see that, it actually runs as expected. which is why we are asking for the entire code as well as all the files, including the, I mean, so in that context, if you have a file that you need, which has already been populated by you, that's fine. You can provide that as part of the, whatever the zip file which contains all the code.
Okay. Okay. And my last question is, it's directly related to the database. I have seen other people doing it for initializing the database. They use the command db equals SQL alchemy within brackets app. And I tried doing that, but it did not work. So I had to do what Tej sir did. He used db init app and then app.context.push. So I just wanted to clarify what is the difference between the two and why one works and the other doesn't. Actually, if I do it like db equals SQL alchemy app, it shows a malformed database. If I try to read from the database.
I see. I mean, I think Tej would be a better position to answer this. Malformed database, I mean, when I see an error like that, it sort of gives the indication that perhaps it is trying to create, or are you sure that your database definition has been done in such a way that it knows to use SQLite 3 and that it is directed to the correct file?
Yes,
Because,
sir.
yeah, in which case I don't expect to see a difference between the two. But what exactly is the difference? I don't know. I think Tej would be better placed to answer that. So I think you could bring it up on the discourse and maybe tag him on it, or tag one of us, and we can make sure that he gets to look at it as well.
Sure, sir. I'll do that. I'll post it on discourse and then tag you and Tej, sir.
Sure. Yeah.
Thanks for the help, sir. Thanks for the help.
Hello.
Yes.
Yeah. So can you please give some idea about what will be the marks distribution? Like how much will be allotted to like Viva or the project or the report, etc.
Abhishek, has that information been shared already with the?
No. Actually, so the whole Viva, actually, as you know, the Viva contributes towards 20% to your final score of this course.
Yes.
So there will be some percentage in that Viva itself for the project evaluation. So of course, we expect the project evaluation percentage to be much higher than the other portions that you will be evaluated on during the Viva. So you can expect a 70-30 ratio. Correct. 70 for project roughly. And
yeah, so that's roughly what we are looking at. The basic idea is that this project is, or rather the Viva is, of course, it is meant as a final summing up of the entire course, but it is primarily focusing on the project, which is, you've got 3 weeks to work on it, and it's basically sort of focusing on that aspect. So what do you have as a demo? Are you able to answer questions related to that? That's the bulk of the Viva, but there will also be some other questions that are not directly part of the project. But yes, it would be roughly a 70-30 split.
Okay. And when will the slots will open for the Viva? Like it is said to be from 1 to 10th of December, right?
Yeah, correct. The Vivas are scheduled in these days.
Okay, so you will open slots like DBMS?
Yeah, so we'll be opening the slots, I guess, by today evening or latest by tomorrow. So you'll be given a Google form that you need to fill out in order to book your slot.
Okay. Okay, thanks. And another one, in our grading sheet, there was one mention for like week 11 and 12, we will be having an optional proctored exam, which will be some bonus marks. So I did not hear anything about that as of now. So are we expecting any such exam, like online proctored exam?
No, that won't be there this time.
Okay. Okay.
So of course, there are Vivas scheduled in between these 2 dates, 1st and 10th of December. So it's better you can focus on that Viva.
Okay. Thanks. Sorry, Abhishek, one last question. So this report and everything, we have to upload it by 28th itself, right?
Yeah, correct. Everything related to the project must be finalized and submitted by 28th.
28th. Okay, thank you.
Hello.
Yes, please go ahead.
I want to ask about the reports and the videos that we have to make regarding the flashcard project. So in the videos, how, like, till what depth do we have to explain each and every functionality of the app, or like I just want some guidance on what do we have to explain in the video for the project.
Abhishek, did we already circulate that part of it, or not? That's not yet done. I think we had
not
discussed.
yet. For video, I guess it's not done yet. The report schema has been provided.
Oh, okay. For the video also. See, I mean, we are looking at a 2 to 3 minute video, and we are fairly strict on that time, meaning that we are not looking for longer videos. Okay. And within 2 to 3 minutes, there is not too much that you can really do. So I think we had this discussion. I mean, Abhishek, maybe it might have been good to just capture that and also just send it out as an email as for the template. But basically what we are looking for is a very brief introduction of yourself, who you are, what your roll number is, and then say, okay, this is the project that you have worked on. Go into a demo of the project where basically you are sort of, all the points that were there mentioned in the presentation, you should be able to sort of bring out those points saying, okay, this is how you have implemented it. This is what your view looks like. And this is what the app looks like when an end user is using it, right? So this will basically be a screencast, right? So you should be able to record a screencast. The simplest way to record a screencast would actually be, just start a Google Meet, join and present to it and start recording, right? The recording will basically drop into your Google Drive folder, and you can just hopefully you get it right, and it's less than 3 minutes long. If any minor editing is required, I think there are some tools that are available reasonably easily for editing. But yeah, basically what we are looking for is a quick demo of what are the aspects that you have implemented. Anything which is like extra in terms of the API validation, things of that sort that you might have done. And finally, anything which goes beyond the problem statement, right? So that would basically be things like what are the additional features that you have implemented, including if you want to bring out, how have you handled the aesthetics or the styling or anything of that sort, anything that you feel is relevant in terms of the design of the app. Okay, so yeah, total to be about total to be less than 3 minutes. That's all. And as mentioned in the chat, OBS Studio is a great option for recording. Only thing to watch out for is, if you are not familiar with it, it can take a little while to get used to. And if all that you are looking for is to do some basic editing and so on, then it might take you a little time to get used to that. There are fairly simple tutorials on how to cut and crop and remove things and so on, which is all you really need, right? We are not looking for any fancy subtitles or titles or anything of that sort. Just make sure that the length is not over the limit. Okay. I mean, worst case, you can, you make sure you just have a script ready with you and you just re-record it, and that's it. Right? 3 minutes is all that we are looking for.
Yeah, thank you. So just one last question. I want to ask about the Google slides about the flashcard project mentioned about a section of recommended, and in brackets it is written graded. Okay, so the first point over there is we have to create an API for CRUD on individual decks and cards. Apart from that, it talks about validation and form validation. So I'm sorry if this was already answered, but for clarification, what happens if we don't write a RESTful API? So will it severely affect grading?
I mean, this is a bonus, right? I mean, so the API part of it is sort of a bonus marks, right? So it doesn't sort of penalize you as such. And you can still get like full marks on the course even without even doing that part of it.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Okay, so just want to add a bit towards the screencast or the presentation video that you are supposed to record for your project. So we would highly recommend you to please keep your videos on while recording that screencast. We will be putting an announcement to clarify the same, and the other guidelines that we have discussed in today's session. We'll be sending out an announcement to clarify the same.
I think that also answers the question in the chat, hopefully. Yeah.
Yeah, the timing was perfect.
Yeah.
So I would like to, I mean, generally throw open a couple of questions for the students as well. In terms of, first of all, anybody, whatever thoughts you have, what were you expecting from the course? Did it sort of match those expectations? Or if not, what else would you sort of look for? Right. I mean, the reason I'm asking this is, of course, we can't change what has been covered in this course, but this is sort of a live course, right? It's going to keep continuing and developing with time. And maybe that would also help to sort of clarify some of your own expectations as well. Maybe what you were expecting versus what we intended were a bit different, right? So, yeah. There's one in the chat saying how to create a YAML file for REST API. I'm not sure I understood that. Is that a question saying how should we, should there have been a screencast for that? And I'm not sure I understood if that was a question or not.
Sir, there is a requirement to submit a YML file for the REST API in the report. So I am not sure how to create a YML API explaining the YML file explaining the REST APIs.
But that screencast has already been provided for the same in week 6. Kindly refer to that screencast.
Correct. I mean, week 6, I think that whole Swagger and the documentation part of it was, I think that covers that YML part.
Yeah, correct. So I guess Kumar raised his hand. I guess he wanted to answer the question that I guess you just asked. So Kumar, would you like to?
Hi, sir. Hi, sir. Good afternoon. Hi, Nitin, sir. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Yeah. As you mentioned that what type of thing I expecting from the course.
Yeah.
So I have some point here. Actually, generally, what I feel that. So the day by day, the technology is every time is changing. So what type of knowledge I have to be strong so I can understand that the code of the technology day by day changing. So if I independently go and study something, it takes so much time. And for example, suppose that every place I face this type of problem like that. Suppose login system is there, and so what's happened and the modularize that when our app is going bigger and how to make it separate. So I have seen that the Thejesh sir this screencast and I understood the many things. So what happened once I want to go in the depth, so I search on the internet and then I get a many type of the modules and many different type of things, and actually it's like a ocean type of thing I lost there. So what is the way, and even the creating the database, that is not a one way. So whatever we learn is the one way, and the sometime with the official that Flask official site, something is given that some different way. So if I try to concentrate in the one way to be command, so I want to be command in the one thing. So it takes so much time. If I go through the suppose a screencast, so after some time, sir is not there to help. So at last I have to go on the some documentation, but the documentation scenario is completely different. They completely different way to design. So it's look like the SHM type of thing fluctuating here to there, here to there. And at the end we try to just complete our work with work just let it complete and without any confidence. I want that type of confidence. So if I think and I'm able to make something understand, if I see some module or some internet, some documentation, at least I should able to understand what is happening in the scenario. So how to get this type of confidence in that one general things we face in the term of the programming, and many questions raise the whenever we learn one by one. The many question raise like that. We learned the so much thing in the DBMS and the SQL and the completely. So I'm seeing whenever we come in the web designing, we lost that thing and uh, many question comes. So the correlation. So I'm not going to fetch with the SQL and the SQL alchemy. That is completely different. Even in that our the web complete web designing, the understanding the documentation. So it's take time. Even I understand that way that documentation telling. So what's happening? Documentation has that many things. So I take the time, I study and I understood, and then what's happened in that way, I actually complete lost the way sir taught, like that screencast many things that Thejesh sir taught. It was very wonderful, but after some time I get stuck. So in that time only the wave, the internet is only option, and that's taking me somewhere else.
Right. I think I get what you are saying. But I think part of the answer to what you are saying is also you have already said it, right? The biggest problem that we face in course like this, right? Unlike pretty much any other course that you can think of that you are likely to do over here, any other thing, including DBMS or whatever, there are textbooks. And the reason why there are textbooks is because these are mature technologies. They have been around. I mean, so DB, RDBMS, the idea has been around since the 70s, if not earlier, right? And there is a lot of sort of theory about how it works and, what are the sort of core concepts involved over there. And those are the parts that are going to be covered. Now, in the RDBMS course, as a result, they also choose, the Postgres PGSQL as the demonstration platform to basically say, this is what a good database looks like. And the reason for that is because, Postgres is based on a solid academic as well as industrial background, right? It's sort of evolution of another database that was called Ingress that had its origins quite a long time ago. Bottom line is there are some, first of all, you have like better references in the sense that, you can actually go out, look for a book. And there are some books that have been known to be fairly good at this point. Now, in an app development course, that becomes harder to do because I think, from the searching that you have done, I'm sure you would have noticed that first of all, you just go look for web application framework and you'll probably find 1,000 different options. Okay. Then if you say Python web application development framework, you'll probably find at least like 20 or 30. Okay. That is if you really start searching. Even the most popular ones, right? I can reel off things like there is Django, there was this thing called Turbo Gears, there was CherryPy, WebPy, Web2Py, Web.py, right? And then finally Flask. Okay, so the reason why we chose Flask is, I mean, it's an interesting sort of evolution of complexity. What has happened is people started off with various things. They started coming up with more and more features in the web application framework and finally found, okay, look, this is getting out of hand. It's getting to be too much. So let's simplify. And that's where Flask came into the picture. So now what's the implication of all of this? What happens as a result of this is that there are, if there are n frameworks, there are n square opinions on the internet about what is the correct way of doing something, right? And as a result, people basically, you'll find all kinds of stuff that is in some cases directly contradicting whatever we have said in the course. Okay. So how do you solve something of this sort? We don't have a clear solution, right? I mean, we can't really say that, okay, do this way, because at the end of the day, it's not possible for us to solve all possible Flask problems as well. I mean, it's not like we are developing Flask. Okay. And if you go and look on the Flask website, you will find that there is a slightly different way of doing things. In fact, what you are likely to find is that the thing that we might have told you is what was in fact recommended by Flask maybe one iteration ago, right? Or in a previous version number, but now they have decided that they want to change the way they're doing things. That can also happen. Bottom line is that, there's no sort of clear-cut thing saying, okay, this is the right way to do it. Okay. And which is why, as far as possible in this course, what we tried to do was to focus on the concepts. Okay. Whether that was completely successful or not, I can't say. But I mean, it's sort of the best that we could do in that sense. Okay. So, yeah, I mean, you go look at something like SQL Alchemy, you will find that there is one particular way of doing it. SQL Alchemy was not written purely for Flask, right? SQL Alchemy is sort of an evolution of something called an object relation manager, which in turn is a variant of, there are variants of it used by the other frameworks, right? So, and not just that, you will find that probably between version 2 and version 3, there were like sufficient changes that, whatever you learn now, 2 years from now is suddenly going to be different. So the only thing that you can really, that we as instructors can target in this is that we give you sufficient exposure to these ideas that when you go out onto the internet, you at least know, or at least you get an idea of what to look for. Okay. Because, and when you read something, you are then able to make sense of it and say, okay, does this answer my question or not? And if not, then, how should I look for it? Where should I look for it? What are the right keywords? What are the ways to search for it? That is pretty much the only thing that we can sort of hope for at this point. Okay. I know it's not a convincing answer to your question, but those are the limitations. I mean, this field is such that the technology itself is literally, developing every month. There will be a new thing that, is quite different from what was there earlier. Okay. So from the time that we started this course until now, there have already been like some additional version releases of each of these pieces of software, right? Replit itself has gone through some modifications. I think some of you would in fact have noticed that from the simple point that, the version that you are using to develop your apps and the version that's there on Replit and the version that we are finally using to evaluate for Python are all ending up being different. Okay. So, I mean, we can't win, right? There's no way that we can really solve this problem once and for all, because one thing that we could probably have done is to, just put hard limits on every single thing and say, look, these are the versions you need to use. That doesn't solve the problem that you raised, because finally you still need to go out and search for something, right? And when you go onto Google or Stack Overflow and search for something, they're not going to be restricted to the version that you are looking at. So you have to be able to sort of pick up and adapt from there. I don't know if that's a satisfactory answer, but it's hopefully it at least addresses what you.
Yes, sir. I have something here too. I want to add here one thing.
Yeah.
Can I go? Yes. Just I want to, as a beginner, suppose we want to. There is a two thing. What I face the problem. Suppose in the secure login, one of the thing, and the how to modularize that over the app. So what's happened? My question is that whenever we see that even the simple login and the sign up in using the Flask, if I see that 10 different the content over the net, I find that all 10 is the different way. Yes, there is some similarity, but even somewhere something is very different. So meaning is that there is a 10 or 20 different way of developing this. So how that committee or the people come to the confident that okay, the way he defined, it's really good. So how they get the confidence, how they develop this idea, that thing, and as a beginner, which method I have to follow to be confident in the future. So if I go the 10 fluctuating in the 10 different method, even after 1 year, I will not get confident. So
right. I mean, that's a good question you raise. I will again, try to give an answer, but I unfortunately must say in advance that I don't think it's going to be a very convincing answer, because I'm not convinced about it myself. And the problem over here is that the way I see it, what you have to do is, I mean, okay, so you asked that question, right? How does the person who's creating the framework know that this is the right solution? The bottom line is it's based on experience.
Yeah, even not framework, even the simple applications like a login and the sign up and that there is how to modularize the thing.
Right. Maybe either a library or maybe even how to use a library. Maybe even something like, I guess, just how to implement basic login or something like that.
As a point, in one of the screencast, Thejesh sir told that when he was set up the Flask structure, then he told that he gave that one idea. This is the way we can set up that, and then he came to the Flask official the website, and he told that Flask also defined that one of the way. So how to the modularize the entire system. So sir was telling that okay, it is also not a bad thing, but as a beginner, the question raised. So what should do? Because if sometime we get the problem, so we want Thejesh sir to live, and if they comes in the even the week ones and they can some sort of questioning answering, so it will give the confidence. But sir was not the past some week is there, so there is only one option to go net and search that. So it is the problem happen because it is not possible to in a screencast give the all the possible, because once we do some application in reality, we get even the for the single dot we get a trouble, and trouble go up to the night sometime.
No, absolutely. I understand that, for the simple reason that anytime that I try to develop an app, it's the same story, right? I mean, I end up having to search a lot for how to do certain things, how to use a certain library, what's the right way to do something. And the bottom line is each person sort of develops their own programming style. And the only way you can do that is through experience, right? And the result of that is that when you see certain code which is written by someone else, you will either find that, oh yeah, this looks good, this is a nice way of doing it, and therefore I will adapt it and I will start using this approach. Or you might find, okay, this doesn't look nice to me, I don't understand why they have done it this way, or maybe it is not particularly good for whatever reason, and I'm not going to use it. Now, there are very few of these cases where the answer is actually clear cut, saying this is a better way or that is a worse way, right? So it's very rare that you can actually give a clear cut answer like that, saying, okay, this is the right way to do it and every other way is wrong. Because usually if that happens, then automatically that becomes the right thing to do, and people adapt uniformly adopt that approach. Okay. But when you do have multiple options and each one of them has a different, it differs only sort of in the aesthetics, meaning that maybe it's in the way that you express your code or the way that you write a particular function, right? There are different ways of doing it. What Tej finds to be the right way of writing code is very likely different from what the person who created Flask had in mind. Okay, and which one of them is correct? Both, right? Both have a style of coding that suits them. And ultimately what happens is that you will need to sort of develop your own style, in the sense that as you see more and more examples of code, you will realize that, okay, writing code in a certain way is better, it's cleaner, and therefore, you will probably end up getting better results if you follow a particular structure, if you use a specific layout for your program. All of those things, unfortunately, can only come from experience. And the reason I say that is because even if we try giving you one specific layout, I mean, which we have, in the screencast, there are the code that Tej used is available. So that's always there as a starting point that you can use. But I would definitely not go so far as to say that, that's the only way you should write your code. You might find that you came across another app somewhere else where you liked the style of coding better, in which case you should be able to adapt that to your needs, right? So yeah, I mean, this whole business of how do you find out what is the right way to write code, and how do you then know where to search, and if you search and you find a solution, then you to know which is the right solution for your needs. All of those, unfortunately, come only from experience, right? So you have to sort of keep at it and try it out and sort of see how it goes, I guess.
Sir, one thing here, one request is also there. Actually, I raised this point earlier also. In practical, what happened, whatever the Thejesh sir taught, I tried to implement that way only. And it took some time and I developed the code and it's worked. But what happened when I tried to extend that, the code further at my level, I got stuck. And I thought for the 2 hour that how to think. I see the video again and again. Again, I couldn't get that idea. Then after 2-3 hours, I have to change again. I went to the different way and learning the different thing. So the things practically that type of problem we face that. So if the I don't have a problem and the sir Tejas sir is making, I want to develop that way. And it's more practical also. So the thing is that if sir is comes in the once a live session and that we can discuss something our problem, it will be the
No, that's true. But what I would
wonderful
also
and more
suggest is,
better. So
see, when we know that there is a specific question, then we'll definitely make an effort to try and answer that. So what I would suggest is, these kind of things, if you can, for example, bring it up on the discourse and say that this is a problem that you have faced, even if Tej has not seen it directly, one of the others, Abhishek or somebody, would tag him and, just bring it to his attention and say, okay, can you take a look at this and give an answer? And he is usually quite prompt with those things, right? And to be frank, even with me also, a lot of the things in the live sessions, I have not really known what, at the end of the day, to be frank, this live session, when we started out, there were no questions. So I didn't really know what to do, right? Which is why I was sort of asking a few questions just to sort of see what happens over there. If you do have questions, you may not think of them during the live session. Fine, bring it up on email later so that we at least are aware of it. We can also think about it and give you a more sort of reasoned answer. Right? So if you do, as far as Tej is concerned, I know that at least initially he was checking the discourse. Then I don't know, I think he sort of dropped, may not have been very regular on that. But if at any point, if he was tagged on something, I'm sure he would be able to give you a better response.
Sir, what is cache?
Sorry, what?
Cache. So the folder which is.
Okay. So yeah, sorry, there were a few other raised hands. So I think Kumar will have to get to the others now. Yeah, PyCache. See, Python is an interpreted language, right? Meaning that in principle, at least what the interpreter does is it reads the Python code line by line and executes it, meaning that, it's like on the fly figuring out what are the exact steps to be done and running those instructions, right? But in practice, of course, as you know, ultimately there is some machine language which is there underneath, right? Your x86 processor, which is actually running the code. So this interpreter, the time that it spends in basically converting those Python instructions into the machine language, instead of wasting that time, what it says is, let's sort of store a partially compiled version so that next time around, if you try running the same code, it will be able to run it faster. So PyCache is just a cache folder that's created, and a cache in general is something which is, a temporary storage, right? And
Is it created automatically?
Yeah, it will be created automatically when you run the script. So anytime that you run a Python script, it automatically sort of creates a PyCache. I mean, it used to create something called a .pyc file. I'm not sure if that is the same as PyCache. But yeah, that's basically what it's doing. It's created by the interpreter when it runs the first time. Okay. Okay. Preetodeep, I think you have a question.
Actually, no, sir, it was not a question. I just wanted to, since you asked for feedback, I thought I'd say something. I'll wait if others have questions.
Okay, sure. Thanks. Yeah. Patrick, I guess you just asked the question, right? So if you are done, maybe you could lower the hand, or else you can ask if you still have something. Okay, great. Manish.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, I have few questions regarding flashcard application.
Yeah.
should it support multiple users, or it should be a single user should be able to do any task like creating a deck or creating a card?
See, for the project, single user is sufficient because I mean, I had asked for login, but that's more to sort of just show the basics of how you would implement a login procedure and some kind of differentiation of functionality based on the user. But I'm not really looking for full role-based access control or anything of that sort. Anything which you do over there will basically be sort of, you can tag that as extra, which we will consider later. But the basics of login are just, the login has to be there, but apart from that, you can also have a single user doing everything.
Okay, sir. Because when I saw to implement user login, I thought that we should develop an application that support multiple users.
I mean, ideally, yes, that is the idea, because you are, like I said, there will be a user model, which means that there is a possibility of having multiple users over there. And in which case you could have like each user has some decks associated with them, right? And within that deck, they can create cards and so on. My point is that I'm not expecting that, you do sort of things where only some users are allowed to create decks, only some are allowed to add cards, things of that sort, that you can choose to keep it as simple as you want.
Means, sir, for now, we should not care about multiple users.
Well, I'm not sure what exactly you mean by not care about multiple users, because there is a user login, which means that I should at least be able to create different users who have different decks. You need not have it so that, yeah.
This web application should be able to handle multiple users, their decks and their cards.
Yes.
Okay, sir. Sir, what is a score and overall deck score? I could not find the difference.
No, see, that score part of it is, I mean, that is completely up to you. You can just say the score is always 0, and I'm fine with that also, right? What happens in practice on a flashcard application is that the user is using it to try and learn something, right? Maybe it's for a new language or something, in which case the score is just going to be which and all cards have you already sort of covered, and are you sort of confident about some cards, or do you want to review some cards again? Do you want to sort of look at certain things one more time, things of that sort? It's just a revision platform, right? So the thing is, it's not like there is any marks or anything associated with the cards. This is not a quiz, right? So if you finally decide that, okay, the score is irrelevant and I'm just going to assign 0 as the score for everything, okay, that's also fine. I don't care. But the point is, it should be able to keep track of the score, or, I mean, you should be able to think about it and say, okay, if I am developing this application, then this is how I might define scores. We are looking for how you would define something like that.
Sir, in presentation, I saw 2 words. One is score and overall deck score. That's why I was confused about that.
Yeah. So, if you look at any flashcard application, basically what it says is the score for an individual card would probably be easy, hard, medium, something like that. And the overall deck score would be the average across all the cards which are in the deck. So, maybe it would, you take 1 for easy, 2 for medium, 3 for hard, and you take an average across all the cards in the deck, and that would be the deck score. That's one possibility, right? But what I'm saying is that this is not unique and it is not defined as part of the problem. So whatever you do there is your choice.
Okay, sir. I was thinking, sir, what to do with this easy, medium, and difficult?
Nothing. You don't have to do anything. It's your choice what you do with it. I mean, what you need to think about over here is this. This is an application that has, a rough application statement has been given to you. Beyond that, there are still certain things that have been intentionally left open. And part of the reason is to see how you would approach those, how you would fill out the things over there, and, create the application according to that. You can choose whatever you want. You will not be penalized for those choices. It's just a question of, are you able to say what are the choices you have made and how you have implemented them?
Sir, I made a form. From there, a user can create a new deck, and inside deck, user can create multiple cards. Should we also apply a CRUD function on using API?
That is what is the bonus part, right? That has been given. So yes, I mean, if you implement the API for CRUD, then that will count towards bonus marks. If you don't implement it, it will still, we'll look at the rest of your project demo, and that will also be fine.
So, sir, marking scheme is not important here, right?
Meaning what?
Flashcards are used for memorization. Then, what is the meaning of marking, and on what basis marking is
I mean, the marks on the flashcards.
Yes, sir.
No, I mean, there is no marks on flashcards. Yeah, that's entirely just some internal number that you associate with a flashcard, which you may or may not use in order to decide when the card should come up next and be displayed to the user next.
Okay, sir. So, from database table, card may appear in random order, or it should be in sequential order.
Your choice.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Okay. So see, what has been defined in the problem statement is intentionally kept sort of slightly open-ended. You can make whatever choices you want beyond that, provided you are able to write down those choices and say that this is how you have implemented it. That's all we are looking for. You should be able to say that this is the expected functionality and that this is what you have done. Right? There are intentionally many things that are open-ended in this.
Okay, sir. Sir, one more question, sir. I developed in local environment. Should I upload on replit.com?
See, we are strongly recommending Replit for one simple reason, because we know that if it works over there, then we can also test it if necessary. If you have developed on the local environment, then whatever you submit should have all the instructions and environment requirements and all of that, which is needed for us to run it over here if necessary, in case we need to test your code locally. So,
okay, sir. On Replit,
yeah.
Sir, on Replit, do I need to use a online degree? This email ID or any email ID can be used?
No, I think you should use the online degree. I mean, we are sort of recommending that. I think because that allows it to be kept as a private Replit. Otherwise, it becomes public, I think.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
So where do we have to upload explanation video?
Sorry, upload what?
Explanation video.
I think those that information about where to upload the video as well as the final report will be sent out shortly. Abhishek?
Yeah, it's been sent out. It's been available under the project unit. It's final project unit. You are supposed to include your project report, that PDF, in the submission that you will make. And you are supposed to upload your presentation video on your drive and give us the necessary permissions and paste the link in your project report so that we can have it. Yeah, is it okay?
Permission like to a member or like accessible to all?
It's better if you can leave it accessible to all. It's okay. It's fine.
Sir, at Replit, have you provided any link to upload the whole project?
No, on Replit, you create the REPL and then you can, I mean, if you are using Replit, you can give the link to that, I guess, in the submission. That's all.
Excuse me, sir.
Yes, Preetu.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to clarify something. Abhishek sir said we can leave it open to all. Did he mean open to all users within the IITM organization, or anyone with the link can access it?
Yeah, anyone with the link. You can give them the view access.
Okay.
Yeah, the links will generally not be made public anyway, but this sort of makes it a bit easier for the different instructors to take a look at it.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, I think Preethadeep, we can get back to. I don't see any other raised hands, so maybe your question or your feedback.
Yeah, actually, you asked regarding our expectations and what we felt regarding the course. I just thought I'd say something on that.
Yeah.
So regarding the expectations, actually, I did not come into the course thinking that we would design web apps because my mind wasn't conditioned to think about apps in this category. Like I never thought that websites can become an app in themselves. I always thought apps were desktop apps or mobile apps or something like that.
Okay.
So But the initial lectures that you gave on these topics, they kind of convinced me that web apps are better than desktop apps.
Okay.
So yeah, that was a new experience. I did not expect to learn about web apps, but now that I'm learning about web apps, I feel that web apps are better. And one more thing, I guess this is the best thing about the course that I have found so far. Your lectures, specifically, I'm talking about the lectures, at least the first few weeks. Actually, I'm talking about all the lectures that you have made specifically, because the length of them are not very long. I mean, compared to other, the average length of the lectures in other courses, the lectures here are shorter. The number of lectures may be higher, but the length of each individual lecture is short. So personally, I found that it made it quite easy to assimilate what is given in each lecture and then move on to the next one. So maybe this thing, I believe you are also going to take the next MAT 2 course.
Right.
So maybe if possible, if this trend can be continued, it would be great.
Yeah. No, I think part of the credit for that also goes to the Abhishek and the team, because they have been the ones who are sort of, I mean, I sort of record as a 1.5 hour thing, and then they do the editing, breaking it up and into smaller segments.
Yeah, then I should thank the team as well. So that has been a great help. Because tediously watching a 40-minute lecture, what happened to me is, what happens sometimes, I forget what the start of the lecture was dealing with, and I just remember the end. So that continuity becomes a problem if the lectures are too long. And
right. No, I mean, that's definitely something we have been keeping in mind. So yeah, the intention is always to have relatively short. So yeah, around 15 to 20 minutes max, I think, is what we are looking at, preferably less.
One more great aspect about this course that I have found out is that the activity questions are exactly in line with what have been taught in the lectures. There are a few which are also outside the scope, but generally what I have felt is, even if I did not watch a lecture due to lack of time, if I just went through the activity questions and just correlated what was there with some other external resource, that would have been more than enough to cover what was already taught in the lectures. So this aspect was also missing in some of the other courses, I felt. So in this regard, this course was exceptional.
Okay, that's once again, I mean, most of the activity questions I think were done by the team. I do feel that actually, I mean, that's an interesting point you raise. I do think that maybe there is another way of looking at it, which is that maybe the activity questions should go a bit beyond what is there in the videos. But yeah, I mean, the way that you have mentioned it, saying that, yeah, they help you to get an understanding of what's there, I think that's a good feedback. Yeah, good to know. Thanks.
I guess I should state this as well. The biggest gripe that I have had with this course.
Sure, absolutely.
The screencasts, the practical screencasts. Initially, the problem was I had personally I had a few some difficulty with the audio quality of those screencasts in the initial weeks. But as of week 5 and later, it is quite good. I understand what sir is saying. But regarding the content itself, what happens is, in your lectures, when I watch it once, I get it. I understand everything that you say. Or maybe I need to rewind a couple of times, but that's all. That's it. But as regards screencasts, what happens is I don't remember what is going on, or I'm unable to get it the first time. Also, another issue is sometimes a totally new concept comes out of the blue, and there is no further explanation on it, or how do we use it or something. The latest one, that an example I can give in this regard is the DB engine. Tej sir mentioned about engine and dialect, and there are a few other things he mentioned. So those things, how do we implement, or where does it come into the overall picture? I still don't get it. I just blindly copied whatever he wrote, and it works for the project, so it works for me. So that is one thing that I felt that could have been improved, and maybe in the AppDev 2 course, maybe the screencasts could be better.
So actually, I mean, that's, I think, point definitely I would like to address. The first part, what you said about the audio quality, I think because Tej was recording it, at his place in Bangalore. So I think I was lucky to have the NPTEL studio over here, and I was using that for the recordings, which is why I think the audio quality was generally very high, except maybe 1 week or so. But I think, that was also sorted out. And like you said, Tej's videos were better later. Now,
it's great now.
Yeah, regarding the second part of what you said, that there are some things that are coming up which were not explained in sufficient clarity. This is actually an interesting point, because that is my biggest problem as an instructor with online courses, right? Because when I'm teaching in a classroom, it is very different, because literally I give the lecture, and during the lecture, I see the students' faces, right? And that helps me to sort of know whether I'm getting through or not. And if I see blank stares, then I know that I immediately need to stop and, explain something in more detail, or at least ask a question. What happened? I mean, why are you all looking blank?
Yeah.
Now, the problem is that when I'm recording a screencast, sometimes, as you said, right, I might start using jargon, which is completely like second nature to me, because I've been working on this for a long time. But I don't realize that, or rather, I'm sort of missing the fact that for the students, it is new, right? So in such cases, I think the best thing to do is actually, I mean, that's why we had the discourse forums, right? Bring it up over there, and usually, of course, they can be addressed directly in the forum. But even apart from that, I think if necessary, if a re-recording or an extra recording needs to be done, I think that was also something that could definitely be handled. But the point is that, what the kind of thing that you have mentioned can't be fixed unless we have feedback. So definitely your feedback, I think, is important. But, see, for Tej, it would be like trivial to explain that once he knows that there is an issue over here. But when you are recording the screencast, sometimes you miss that point that, maybe it is not something that is completely obvious to a student, right?
Yeah. Actually, I did not mean to say that Tej sir's lectures are not good or something.
No,
He explains it quite well. But at the final outcome, what I felt was your lectures, I just watched once and I got it. But that was not the case with screencasts. So how they're implemented or why that happens, even if I don't know, but what happens at the end, I can understand that here I need to rewatch it, but there I can get it with only one session of watching. So that is why I felt I should bring this up.
Yeah, having said that, my personal opinion is probably that side is probably a bit better to be, in the sense that the lecture should be a little bit on the challenging side. Okay, they should sort of, force the person to go out and read a little bit more to make sure they have understood what they have covered. So so I think there's a lot to be said for that as well. But I mean, this feedback, I think, helps, and it basically comes down to this. If it was a live session where he was talking about it and you had just brought this up, it would be like trivial to immediately explain it, clarify it, and move on. But sometimes, even for me, there were a few places where, I mean, literally midway through giving the lecture, I realized that, okay, wait, I'm making assumptions here that students may not know. But the moment something like that hits me, I try and sort of address it on the spot. But there may be places where I've missed that completely and, used jargon or used terminology, which may not be familiar to students.
Yes, sir.
So, yeah, that can happen. But yeah, I think this is definitely something to be noted. And in fact, like you said, maybe we can have some way of collecting specific notes on these things so that we can figure out where to revise them or review them on the next iteration. So yeah. Thank you.
And just one last point, I would like to agree with what Kumar said. Some of the points that he said were exceptionally relevant, and I have faced it since the last 2 or 3 days because I'm working on the project.
Right.
For example, I'm thinking of how to design something, and when I get stuck, I search Stack Overflow or something, and the way they have done it is totally different, or some other documentation. So I have to actually come back and decide whether it is worth it to change the whole thing from the scratch, or so that is a pertinent issue he raised, and I think we should learn how to handle those situations. And one more question is, since we're learning Flask and there are a lot of other frameworks, how equipped are we once we get a command over Flask, how equipped are we to switch to some other framework, whichever one we need? For example, we need something else, and how well equipped will we be having learned Flask to switch to something else?
That's a good point. So, that's something that we had sort of been discussing when we were looking at whether Flask is the right thing to do. And, I mean, so some of the concepts, this whole idea of building database models using an ORM like SQL Alchemy in order to interface with the database, this whole idea of separating out views into templates that need to be populated, the idea of having controllers that get called and, actually interface between the model and the view. Those are sufficiently generic concepts that when you see a new framework, whether it's Django or whether it's, something in Node.js or whatever it is, even in a different language like Node.js or Golang or whatever it is, right? I mean, you should see that these concepts translate across easily, right?
Okay.
And but then of course, that's like saying that the Devanagari script and therefore Hindi, right? It's not the same at all. At least you are able to read it, and you are able to sort of get the basic structure of the thing. Getting familiar with it to the point where you can write code is ultimately, unfortunately, just the only solution is experience. There's no sort of magic bullet for that. But yeah, I mean, what we are aiming for is, does it at least get you to the point where you are able to understand the concepts? So when you go and see that there is a view template that is being generated over here, and this is being rendered, and this is how the different relationships between the models are being implemented. Those are all now terms that you are familiar with, and you can now interpret the new framework or the new language in that context. That's basically what we are aiming for. So
Yes,
hopefully it should help you with that.
Yes, sir. Yes, I got it. Yeah, I just wanted to thank you and all the course support team members for the great course that you have made. And frankly speaking, this has been one of the best ones, along with Python and CT, that I have so far got in this program. So thank you.
Good to hear that. Thank you so much.
Pooja?
Kumar. Maybe take Pooja's question first before Kumar.
Actually, my question was related to Pritodeep, so that's just interesting.
Go ahead.
Sorry, sir, for interruption. But I just want to tell my view that whatever Pritodeep told that about the course and the length, I have a just completely opposite view of that.
Okay.
So yeah, so I have a different view because that if I say that, if I talk about that from the beginning to till now the video, no.
Yeah.
So I feel that sometime your video goes so interesting. I need more, and I see that video finished.
Okay.
So yeah. So frankly, is that the first 1 or 2 week video I have seen. So it's look like that more type of story or the history type of thing. But gradually the week 3 and 4 the video went up, and I felt that the problem, some developer who is developing something or he did earlier, and whatever he problem face in the real world, it's you explain the very well. So I wanted to listen more, and I see that your video finished. So I want at least in your that video to make the more length and put the more content, because I know that you will tell that some more information about that. Reason is that this course that app dev, the dev application development, I don't take as that part of the course because it's look like this is the world today. So it is today's world only. The thing is, everything is developing, everything is trying to merge in the web technology. Yeah, it's maybe the 10 years back. So website is look like that only to making some sort of the website. But nowadays, everything is trying to merge in the website. So how much information we'll know, it will be better for us to develop in the future something. So I expect something more, even the more. So in the next time, if some video is there, I want more input from your side, because I will learn more way you in the depth.
And by the way, I mean, you realize that what you have just said is illustration of exactly what I was saying earlier, right? Different people have different styles of absorbing the content. So the fact that you would have liked it to be in a slightly different way is definitely interesting to see. I mean, I get what you are saying. And in fact, I think, some people had even asked for this, even on the discourse. And it is something that we had planned, but unfortunately just haven't had the time. Maybe rather than making the lectures longer, can we have like more written material or something separate that, we sort of extend upon this? That's something we are working on. We are trying to sort of see what we can do about it. And yes, I mean, see, part of the problem with all of this is that, quite frankly, my biggest crib about recording lectures like this is by next year, it's obsolete. right? So I go through this entire process, and it has a shelf life of like 1 year at best. But which is why, of course, I mean, hopefully that's not entirely the case over here, because we have tried to stick to concepts rather than a specific language. But yes, I get what you're saying. There are places where we would also like to sort of see how to expand on certain things. And yeah, thanks for the feedback. We'll definitely keep that in mind.
Yes, your thing is not related to particular language. Actually, your lecture is, I realized later time to time, your lecture is related to the core of the web development. The language time to time change. It's the change, the Flask change, Django change, PHP. Many things can change, but at the core of this thing, the handling of the user, the security, that will be the same at the core. And you explain that the way you explain where we have to concentrate at which point. So at every place, the web technology, in every place there is a many thing is there. So whenever you pointed some particular area, we increase the asynchronous with that, how to improvement the server handling, the database handling, the connection. I come to the know many things. So I know that at which particular, so when one user click one hit button on the client side, and it goes server to database and then return back to the to the client again. It's so many phenomena happening between that, and the way you explain every point, the point how much I understood, it was the very fantastic, and I wanted to know, and I wanted to listen more, and video finished. So
okay, well, thanks for that, and we'll see how we can address that definitely. Thank you.
Okay, so yeah, thanks.
Pooja.
Hello, sir. So it is also a feedback, but I'll be very quick, and I have some different views. So first of all, I would really like to thank you, because coming from a non-engineering background, while taking this course, opting for this course, I was really skeptical, because thinking about this app development and everything. But throughout this course, I felt so easy, and right now I feel very confident. Even though I won't say that even this project is very easy for me and I can just do it in like a day or two, but still I would say that throughout this course, be it lectures, be it screencast, because the syllabus is, it's not a syllabus of a book, right? It's a very vast thing, so it is not easy to cover everything. But the way even Thejesh have done in the screencast, I like it, really like it. And he have, wherever possible, he have given us the links and where we can find out more. So even though those were a little bit technical, but they have to be, but I still think that they were pretty good. And right now I feel that I am in like a much better place and very confident. So even now, if I go to a link or go to some other references and I read stuff, so I can understand those stuff. So I think overall it was really nice. And even though for a student who is not from engineering background, means it's really nice. Yeah. So
thank you. That's very good feedback.
Yeah.
And yes, I mean, this is one thing, because to be frank, most of the people that I generally teach are engineering students. But this course is definitely something that should see a wider audience. I mean, it is definitely should, and the part of the thing was to be accessible to a wider audience. And I realized midway through that, I mean, I was actually making certain assumptions to start with that might be relevant only for engineering students. But I think we were able to catch most of those and at least make it so that it could hit a more general audience. Yeah, thank you. Thanks for the feedback. It's good to know that you found it useful.
Yeah, and additional thanks to the course team. They are fantastic and very helpful. Yeah.
Yeah, great. Great to hear that as well. Thanks for the feedback. Yes. Next, Kumar, I guess you already asked. So yeah, Manish.
Sir, if I use SQL Alchemy, is it possible to join two tables?
To join, yes, I mean, you can construct queries that are basically joins. See, the thing is, SQL Alchemy by itself will not create a new table for you, right? But what it will do is it will allow you to create queries that are involving join type of queries. So I think for that, yeah, you should probably look a little bit more in detail into the SQL Alchemy documentation. but it allows you to do pretty much anything that can be done in a database. See, the whole point of SQL Alchemy is that it is something called an ORM, an object relationship manager, meaning that it is taking the relationships which are there inside the database and converting them into a object-oriented fashion. So what that means is that in principle, anything that you can do as part of the RDBMS should also be possible from an object-oriented point of view. That's pretty much what.
Sir, as a feedback, I would like to say something that course was very smooth. Few things that I think should be documented, like syllabus was not well documented. Whatever you taught is not present inside syllabus. I always try to see what is the syllabus and what is going on in the course. So I think this, whatever you taught should be documented inside the syllabus.
Okay, we'll double check that, and that's definitely something we should look at.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Anything else? Okay. I think it's a nice discussion. I think Tej will be here tomorrow. Is that right, Abhishek? In tomorrow's session.
Yeah. We are planning to have a session with him tomorrow.
Okay, that's great. So, I doubt if I'll be able to join that. I have some other commitments in the morning, but thank you all for joining, and, hopefully you found this session useful. Like I've said before, the discourse is still there. Email is still there. Please feel free to contact us for any questions. And yes, all the best, and hope you all find this course useful.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you everyone for joining. All right.
Thank you, sir.